For 6 years, she'd been Coach Rodriguez, the gym teacher who remembered every kid's name and never let anyone sit out of class. The students thought her stern voice came from years of dealing with middle schoolers. They didn't know it came from years of commanding soldiers in combat zones. Welcome to True Human Tales. Before we begin this powerful tale of hidden service and unexpected courage, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These narratives honor the silent heroes among us. Jefferson Middle School sat on the edge of suburban normalcy, a brick building surrounded by soccer fields and parking lots where parents dropped off their kids every morning at 7:30 sharp. The hallways smelled like floor wax and adolescent energy, lined with lockers that had seen decades of combination locks and nervous first days. It was the kind of place where the biggest crisis was usually a food fight in the cafeteria. In the gymnasium, Coach Maria Rodriguez stood at exactly 5 feet 6 inches, her dark hair pulled back in the same practical ponytail she'd worn for 6 years. She wore the standard teacher uniform, navy blue polo shirt with the school logo, khaki pants, and white sneakers that had seen countless hours on hardwood floors. Her whistle hung from a lanyard around her neck, and her clipboard never left her hand. To the 200 students who cycled through her classes each day, she was a fixture, reliable, fair, and impossible to fool. She knew when Tommy Martinez was faking a stomachache to avoid rope climbing. She remembered that Sarah Chen had a doctor's note about her asthma. She never raised her voice, but when she spoke, everyone listened. Rodriguez has that teacher voice, the kids would say. Like, she doesn't yell, but you just do what she says. It's weird. What they didn't know was that command presence wasn't learned in education school. It was forged in places where hesitation meant death, where a clear, calm voice could mean the difference between a successful mission and a casualty report sent home to grieving families. The morning of October 15th started like any other. Coach Rodriguez unlocked the gymnasium at 7 a.m., turned on the lights, and began setting up equipment for the day's classes. First period would be 7th grade volleyball. Second period, 8th grade fitness testing. Third period, the 6th graders who still thought gym class was recess. She moved through her routine with the same precision she'd maintained for 6 years. Volleyballs stored in the equipment room. Mats arranged for stretching. First aid kit checked and positioned near the office. Every detail planned, every contingency considered. She moved through her routine with the same precision she'd maintained for 6 years. Volleyballs stored in the equipment room. Mats arranged for stretching. First aid kit checked and positioned near the office. Every detail planned, every contingency considered. Because Maria Rodriguez had learned a long time ago that preparation wasn't just about education. It was about survival in places where hesitation meant death. The first bell rang at 7:45 a.m., and within minutes, the gym filled with the controlled chaos of 37th graders. They slouched in their required gym clothes, dragging their feet across the polished floor with the practiced indifference of adolescence. "All right, let's go," Coach Rodriguez called out, her voice carrying easily across the space. 2 laps around the gym, then we'll start with serving practice." The groans were immediate and predictable. "Coach, do we have to run? My ankle hurts. Can I just walk?" She looked at them with the patient expression she'd perfected over 6 years of middle school teaching. "You can walk when you're 80. Today, you run." As they began their reluctant laps, she watched with the same attention she'd once used to assess terrain and evaluate enemy positions. She noticed that Kevin Thompson favored his left leg, probably the growth spurt his mom had mentioned at parent-teacher conferences. She saw that Maria Santos was pushing herself harder than usual, still trying to prove she belonged after transferring from another school. She saw everything, because in her previous life as a staff sergeant in the 101st Airborne, missing details could get people killed. The volleyball unit proceeded normally. She demonstrated proper serving technique, corrected their form with gentle but firm guidance, and organized them into practice groups. Her movements were efficient, purposeful, and completely unremarkable to anyone who didn't know what to look for. But someone who did know what to look for might have noticed the way she positioned herself to maintain visual contact with all entrances. They might have observed how she never turned her back to the door, how she kept mental track of every student's location, how her eyes swept the room in regular patterns that had nothing to do with volleyball instruction. Old habits from 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq, maintained unconsciously through 6 years of civilian routine. The first sign of trouble came during second period. Coach Rodriguez was timing 8th graders on the mile run when the office intercom crackled to life with a sound that made her blood freeze and her training snap into focus. Attention staff and students, we are now in lockdown. This is not a drill. All staff implement crisis protocol immediately. All students remain calm and follow your teacher's instructions. The kids stopped running. Some looked confused. Others started to panic. But Coach Rodriguez didn't move for exactly 3 seconds, her mind instantly shifting into a mode she'd hoped never to use again in civilian life. Threat assessment, escape routes, defensive positions, student count, combat protocols from a lifetime ago suddenly crystal clear. "Everyone, move to the center of the gym floor," she said, her voice carrying the same calm authority they'd heard in countless volleyball drills. "Sit down in a circle, facing out." "Coach, what's happening?" asked David Kim, a quiet 8th grader who'd been running his best time of the year. "We're going to wait here together until the all clear," she replied, walking to the equipment room. "Keep your voices down." But while she spoke to them like a teacher, she moved like something else entirely. She retrieved the first aid kit and checked that her cell phone had signal. She counted heads, 28 students, all accounted for. She noted the positions of every entrance and calculated the distance to the emergency exit. Most importantly, she opened the equipment room safe that the school administration didn't know existed and removed something that hadn't been there when she'd started teaching at Jefferson Middle School 6 years ago. Her service weapon, legally concealed, carried, and maintained according to federal guidelines. The lockdown protocol was simple. Lock doors, turn off lights, move away from windows, and wait for law enforcement. But Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had learned in the mountains of Afghanistan that sometimes protocols weren't enough to keep people alive. The gymnasium had 3 entrances: the main doors leading to the hallway, the exit to the parking lot, and the door to the locker rooms. She moved to each one, checking locks and sight lines with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd cleared buildings under far more dangerous circumstances in places like Kandahar and Fallujah. "Coach, I'm scared," whispered Emma Watson, a normally confident 8th grader who'd been laughing with her friends just minutes before. "I know," Coach Rodriguez said, kneeling beside the circle of students, "but we're going to be okay. I need everyone to stay calm and quiet. Can you do that for me?" They nodded, and she saw something in their eyes that she recognized from a different time and place. The look of people who needed someone to be strong, someone to take charge, someone to protect them. She'd worn that responsibility before, in mountains and deserts and forward operating bases where she'd led soldiers who were barely older than these kids. Men and women who'd looked to her for leadership when IEDs exploded and bullets flew, when the world collapsed into chaos and terror. The difference was that those soldiers had been trained, equipped, and prepared for combat. These were children who'd been worried about math tests and lunch money 10 minutes ago, but the responsibility felt exactly the same. That's when she heard the first gunshot. It came from the far end of the building, muffled by walls and distance, but unmistakable to someone who'd heard that sound in a dozen different countries. The students jumped, some started to cry, and Coach Rodriguez felt muscle memory take over like a switch being flipped. "Everyone, listen to me," she said, her voice dropping to the tone she'd once used to brief patrol units before dangerous missions in hostile territory. "We're going to move to the equipment room. Quietly, stay low, stay together." She led them across the gym floor, no longer moving like a teacher, but like someone who'd spent years navigating hostile territory. She checked corners, listened for sounds, and positioned herself between the students and any potential threats. The equipment room was small, windowless, and had only one entrance. Tactically, it was a death trap, but it was also the most defensible position available, and it put the maximum amount of distance between her students and whatever was happening in the hallways. "Everyone against the back wall," she whispered. "If you have cell phones, text your parents that you're safe, but keep them on silent." As they huddled together, she moved to the door and listened. More gunshots, closer now, Voices in the hallway, but not the voices of teachers or administrators. Heavy footsteps moving with purpose, the sound of doors being kicked in, the chaos of violence erupting in a place meant for learning. Coach Rodriguez had been in situations like this before, but never with 28 children depending on her. In Afghanistan, her unit had been ambushed by insurgents while escorting a supply convoy through the Korangal Valley. In Iraq, she'd held a position against overwhelming odds while waiting for backup that was 3 hours away. She'd earned a Bronze Star for that action, along with 2 Purple Hearts and a Silver Star for classified operations that had no official records. But none of her students knew that. They just knew that Coach Rodriguez had never let them down, not once in 6 years. She'd been there when Marcus Johnson broke his arm during gymnastics, calmly handling the crisis while keeping the other students calm. She'd stayed late to help struggling students pass their fitness tests. She'd never missed a day, never lost her temper, never made a kid feel stupid for trying their best. The footsteps stopped outside the gymnasium doors. Maria Rodriguez, former Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, 101st Airborne Division, made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She opened the equipment room safe and removed the service pistol she'd hoped never to use again. She'd maintained her concealed carry permit and kept the weapon secured according to federal guidelines, but she'd never expected to need it. 6 years of teaching had been her attempt to build something positive, to work with creation instead of destruction, to heal from wounds that didn't show on the outside. But sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes the skills you've tried to forget become the only things standing between innocence and evil. "I need everyone to stay exactly where you are," she whispered to the students. "No matter what happens, don't come out until I come back for you." "Coach, don't leave us," Emma pleaded. "I'm not leaving you," she replied, checking her weapon with movements that were automatic after 20 years of training. "I'm protecting you." The gym doors burst open. 2 figures in tactical gear entered, moving with the coordinated precision of people who'd planned this attack carefully. They carried assault rifles and moved like they knew exactly where they were going. But they weren't expecting to find a middle school gym teacher with combat experience who'd spent 6 years learning to love the people she was about to defend with her life. What followed wasn't a fight. It was a very brief lesson in the difference between owning weapons and knowing how to use them against someone who'd been trained by the best military in the world. Coach Rodriguez moved through the gymnasium like she'd never left the battlefield. Every step was calculated, every position was tactical, every decision was made with the cold precision of someone who'd survived situations that would have broken most people. The attackers had planned for unarmed teachers and helpless students. They hadn't planned for a decorated combat veteran who'd spent years learning to eliminate threats quickly and efficiently. When the silence returned to the gymnasium, Coach Rodriguez was standing over 2 neutralized threats, her weapon still raised, her breathing steady, her eyes already scanning for additional dangers. The first police officers arrived 6 minutes later to find a middle school gym teacher calmly securing the scene and providing first aid to wounded staff members in the hallway. The students were still in the equipment room, exactly where she'd left them, safe and accounted for. The official report would note that the attack was stopped by an armed staff member with military training. The specific details would remain classified, but the outcome was clear. 0 student casualties, 0 teacher casualties, and a threat eliminated by someone who'd been prepared for this moment her entire adult life. In the days that followed, the story would spread through news reports and social media, but the students who'd been in that equipment room would remember something different. They'd remember the moment their gym teacher stopped being Coach Rodriguez and became something else entirely. They'd remember her calm voice, her steady hands, and the way she'd stood between them and danger without hesitation. Most of all, they'd remember that she'd kept her promise. She'd come back for them. The school board offered her a commendation. The mayor wanted to give her a key to the city. The media requested interviews. She declined them all. Because Maria Rodriguez had learned something important during her 6 years of civilian life. The greatest victories are the ones nobody hears about. The most important battles are the ones fought to protect people who never know they were in danger. 2 weeks later, she was back in the gymnasium, setting up volleyball nets and timing student runs. Her hair was pulled back in the same practical ponytail, her whistle hung from the same lanyard, and her clipboard never left her hand. The students were different now, though. They looked at her with a new kind of respect, a deeper understanding of what it meant to be protected by someone who'd chosen to serve. "Coach," asked Emma Watson during stretching exercises, "were you really a soldier?" "I was," she replied simply, "but now I'm your teacher, and that's exactly where I want to be. Because sometimes the most important mission isn't the one that gets you medals or recognition. Sometimes it's the one that gets you up at 7 a.m. every day to teach kids how to serve a volleyball and run a mile. Sometimes it's the one that lets you build something instead of destroying it. And sometimes, when everything goes wrong and innocent people need protection, it's the one that reminds you why you learned to fight in the first place. Not for glory or politics or abstract principles, but for the simple, sacred responsibility of keeping good people safe." Coach Rodriguez never talked about her military service with the students. She didn't need to. They could see it in the way she moved, hear it in her voice, feel it in the absolute certainty that she would never let anything happen to them. That was enough. Because the best teachers don't just educate minds, they protect hearts, and the best soldiers don't just win battles, they create peace. Maria Rodriguez had learned to do both. This story was brought to you by True Human Tales. Have you ever had a teacher who seemed to possess hidden strength? Tell us about them in the comments below, and let us know what city you're watching from today. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, subscribe to support the channel. We honor the silent guardians who protect and educate, one story at a time.